The famous quote goes something like this: "I've never wished a man dead, but I've read some obituaries with great pleasure." Many times people erroneously attribute that to Mark Twain. Mark Twain didn't say that. That was said by Clarence Darrow. Clarence Darrow, you may or may not know who Clarence Darrow is. You may have heard the name. Back in 1925, he was a defense lawyer, and he defended a defendant called John Scopes. And John Scopes was a teacher in Tennessee, and he taught evolution in the classroom. And he was brought to trial, and he was prosecuted by William Jennings Bryan. And Bryan won the lawsuit, I believe. But the case actually sent such shockwaves through America that about 40 years later, that law in Tennessee was repealed. Darrow was known to be a practicing and a very enthusiastic agnostic. Some would even say he borders on atheism. A law clerk of Darrow who worked in his office was once quoted as of saying on his deathbed, Darrow asked for a Presbyterian minister, a Catholic priest, and a rabbi. I know it sounds like the setup of a joke, but it really wasn't. And he asked them to come to his bedside as he was dying. And he told them in all solemnness, he said, I'm not sure if I've made the right choices in my life. In fact, I'm getting more and more fearful as I draw closer to death that maybe I was wrong. Would each one of you in your own way beseech the Almighty Creator for me? There's no history that tells us that Darrow ever accepted Christ, but that he was hedging his bets as he was dying. As we think about someone who's made choices like Darrow, who said, I'm going not only to defend a man to teach evolution in the schools, but I'm going to myself be an avid agnostic. Even though there's history that tells us that Darrow may have come to the place where he thought there had to be some type of designer designing the world, there is no evidence at all that suggests that he ever knew Jesus as his Savior. But he did come to the understanding that he chose in his life possibly the wrong things to value, the wrong things in which to set his trail upon or his path upon. And that really kind of dovetails greatly with what we're reading here in Ecclesiastes. If you've been following with us, you know that one subject that's front and center in the book of Ecclesiastes, especially for the last few times we've met, is the death each one of us will experience. And you can't read Ecclesiastes without doing some type of intellectual exercise with your own death. It calls you to respond to the truth that one day you and me will die. And so how do we handle that? Now, most people in 2025 think that death is not something you should contemplate much of. In fact, you should stave it off as much as possible. You should run away from it whenever you have an opportunity. But the Bible asks us to be real and to understand that death does happen. It will happen. And until that time, we have to answer a central question for each individual, and that is, what are your priorities right now? As you live hurtling toward your own death, what are you waking up with as your most important endeavors of each day? What is your priority? We don't like death. Woody Allen famously quipped, "I'm not afraid to die, I just don't want to be there when it happens." We all kind of feel that way, but death is not an accident for us. Death is an appointment, and each of you have a date with death. Each of us do. Now you may say, "Dean, that's a horrible way to start a sermon. I don't listen to anything else you have to say." I would agree in that, and I would say take your anger out on the book of Ecclesiastes, because that's what it does. It makes us grapple with this reality, but we don't grapple with it as those who would have no hope, as the Apostle Paul would say. We have great hope, and as we contemplate our deaths, it takes on, that contemplation takes on a different atmosphere altogether. Because what we're told in the book of Ecclesiastes is that there is indeed meaning in death. And life has meaning. And we sometimes struggle to find the meaning because life throws us lots of curveballs, one of them being our own deaths. But before we even get there are lots of curveballs in life. And that's what chapter 9 especially is talking about, the curveballs that life sends us. And how do we find meaning in what happens to us during this life? But there is meaning in our deaths. If you would read with me as I read aloud, this too I carefully explored. Even though the actions of godly and wise people are in God's hands, no one knows whether God will show them favor in this life. The same destiny ultimately awaits everyone, whether righteous or wicked, good or bad, ceremonial, clean or unclean, religious or irreligious. Good people receive the same treatment as sinners, and people who make promises to God are treated like people who don't. It seems so wrong that everyone under the sun suffers the same fate. Already twisted by evil, people choose their own mad course, for they have no hope. There is nothing ahead but death anyway. There is hope only for the living. As they say, it's better to be a live dog than a dead lion. The living at least know they will die. The dead know nothing. They have no further reward, nor are they remembered. Whatever they did in their lifetime, loving, hating, envying, is all gone. They no longer play a part in anything here on earth. Death is final. One of the things that this makes us ask is, if death is so final, then what good is life? Well, it tells us that death is final, but for the believer, death is not actually a destination, but a doorway. For the believer, the question really shouldn't be, what's it going to be like when I die? The question should be, why do I put so much value in life now? Why am I looking for things that I can only find in the next life here? Why am I measuring what happens to me here by the same measuring stick that I will measure life there? I won't find here what's awaiting me there. So why are my priorities so skewed to finding all the joy and all the fun I could possibly have here and now? The reality is I'm going to die, and I'm going to be forgotten. And death's going to come to me like it does my next door neighbor who is evil, or maybe is just a hard person to get along with. We're both going to die. So what meaning does life have? Well, a meaning in life for the believer is simply right now we live for our deaths, because our deaths usher us in to real life then. It's a different outlook than anyone else has who doesn't know Jesus. We don't value this world the same as someone who doesn't have Jesus. Our time here contains both certainty of death, but also, more heartbreakingly, really, I think, the uncertainty of life. We don't know how life's going to go here. It could go horribly wrong today. What are we going to do if that happens? How are we going to respond? Well, Christ's victory over death offers us hope beyond the grave. Without Christ, we should endeavor to get everything we possibly can out of life right now. Without Christ, there is no thing to look forward to. Without Christ, if we don't get it in this life, we just won't ever get it. But with Christ, it doesn't matter what happens in this life, because the next life, everything will be for our benefit. We have to reorient our minds from the way our minds were born and the way we're taught by culture that this life has great meaning. It really doesn't. If you think about it, all the accomplishments you and I could ever have stop at our death. Maybe some of them will continue to have impact later, but not much. Eventually, that impact will wane, and you will be forgotten, and I will be forgotten. The key that we find in the book of Ecclesiastes is we must live with purpose according to God's purposes. I want to tell you a couple of stories. One happened in my own life, in my ministry, and one it's an historical figure. His name is Thomas Carlyle, and he was a writer from Scotland, and he was well known in the Victorian age. He lived in the 1700s, late 17, and throughout the 1800s. He died in 1881. He loved his wife dearly, it said, and his wife loved him amazingly amount. She just was enamored with him and loved him with all her heart. She contracted cancer in her older age. And the day she died, Carlyle was devastated, and it rained the day of her funeral. And the mud was terrible at the gravesite, and people were shaking it off their shoes as they were walking away. And Carlyle went home to his empty house now, and his wife had battled cancer for quite a while, and he went to her bedroom and sat and stared at her empty bed, and it hit him how lonely it is without her, and how he wished he had spent more time. He saw her diary on the nightstand. He started flipping through it, and his eyes lit on this one entry where she wrote, "Today he came and sat with me almost an entire hour, and it was heaven. I so love him." He began to cry, seeing his wife's words. Then he turned the page and he read her next entry. "Today I waited and waited to hear his footfalls on the hall, coming to see me, and they never came. Oh, how I love him and miss him so. Today was a down, bad day." At that, Carlyle began to weep profusely. And not even being aware, he found himself at his wife's grave, and he lay down in the mud, crying out to her. And his friends were running after him because they saw him on his way back to the cemetery. And they found him there. And he was just repeating the same phrase over and over and over. "If I had only known, if I had only known, if I had only known." Carlyle forgot to recognize that life's brevity has to be focused on God's purposes. There is a purpose for each one of us. We ought to recognize life's brevity by focusing on God's purpose. There is something God wants us to do, namely, it's to love each other the way we would love ourselves. And that is the command we're given. And he said, "If I'd only known." Well, of course, that is our command. That's what Jesus did, and that's what he's asking us to do. I didn't know this quote when I was a young minister. I went to the hospital rather late in the evening. I was busy all day, and the lady had her surgery the day before, and I told her I would come see her. And so I stopped in, and it had to be close to 7 o'clock in the evening. I was a young pastor. I was a youth pastor. I didn't have a wife then. I was just sitting in the hospital. And we were talking. And as we were talking, she kept glancing out the window, and her window faced the front of the hospital. And eventually I said, "Are you expecting something?" And she kind of wistfully looked at me, then looked out the window. And she goes, "Well, my husband told me he would come today, and I'm just waiting to see him." And she would stare at the driveway, waiting and hoping to see his car. I finally left, and I didn't find out till a few weeks later when I was talking to her. She was back at church, that he never came that evening. And I always thought, that's a life lesson, Dean. God has given you a glimpse here. If you are ever to marry, know that you have to love this person. And I don't know why the husband didn't come. I'm sure he loved her. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he was just too tired. I don't know. I'm not here to judge him. But I do know that we are here to love each other. And I do know that if we are given a spouse, or we're given a family, or given people who love us, that Jesus is asking us to love them. And we have to recognize the brevity of life, because that's a purpose God gives us. It's the command Jesus left us with, to love our God, but also love each other. God encourages us to live with awareness and purpose in our lives. We're not here just to get everything we possibly can out of this life. Because even if you did, once you die, it's over. You don't carry that with you. We are to live now for the life there, not try to get everything we can now. We should read again Ecclesiastes 9, verse 1. But all this is laid to heart, examining it all, how the righteous and the wise and their deeds are in the hands of God. You and I, every minute we're given, is given from the hand of God, and He has a purpose for us. Well, there's meaning in our death, and hopefully our death will tell us that we lived right before God and used His purposes to order our days, to make His purposes our purposes. But there's also meaning in life right now, and life right now means chaos. Things don't go the way we think they should go or the way anybody thought they should go. Listen to what the writer says here. I have observed something else under the sun. The fastest runner doesn't always win the race. The number one seed doesn't always advance in the March Madness tournament. I can tell you that. Is your bracket blown up yet? I don't want to talk about it. Anyway, the fastest runner doesn't always win the race. The strongest warrior doesn't always win the battle. The wise sometimes go hungry, and the skillful are not necessarily wealthy. And those who are educated don't always lead successful lives. It is all decided by chance and being in the right place at the right time. People can never predict when hard times might come, like a fish in a net or a bird in a trap. People are caught by sudden tragedy. I think we grow up thinking that life should be ordered. And what we don't understand is we live right now in chaos. When things go the way they should go, we should be thankful, because the next time they probably aren't going to go that way. And if we ever start relying on this life to repeat itself without any surprises, we're going to be heartbroken, because life is full of chaos. I would venture to guess that many of you could stand right now if I asked all who stand who had left turns happen in your life in the last 10 years, and have you at a place now you never expected you would be. Most of us would stand up and say, boy, you're preaching now, because that's exactly what happened. I had a different idea in mind, and it's not happening like that at all. In fact, the worst is happening. Someone said once, youth is a mistake, manhood a struggle, old age a regret. Think about that. Because when you're a kid, you think about things that are just wrong, and you don't know enough to really make your life count very well, do you? And then when you're in middle age or midlife, what are you doing? You're earning. You're paying a mortgage. You're helping your kids grow, and you're putting food on the table. And then what do you do after they leave and after your life as a working person is over and you're retired? What do you do then? Most people try to do things that make them happy. Otherwise, they sit in the recliner with a remote in one hand and what? Think about all the things they could have done, or they should have done, or they wish they had done. Life's results often seem random, out of control. And these verses tell us that there's human effort and then there's God's plans. Here's what we need to understand. God is in the chaos of our lives. Heard about a novel. It was about a girl named Karen who in 1979, this wasn't true, but in 1979 in the novel anyway, she went into a coma. And she was in a coma for 17 years. And she missed the fall of the Berlin Wall, the advent of the personal computer. She missed the AIDS crisis. She missed a lot of things that happened from 1979, 17 years later. She was interviewed on one of the TV shows nationally known. This, again, is in a novel. And she was asked, what do you think you learned by being in a coma? What did you discover by this crazy experience you went through, this horrible experience? She said, the thing I learned is that people seem to be more confident than they actually are. People seem to walk into a store to buy a pack of gum with the same confidence they have when they're walking their dog or making life's decisions. But if you ask a simple question like, what do you think is going to happen in the next 10 years? Or what's the most important thing you could accomplish in your life? They have no confidence at all. They tend to think life is meaningless. You and I live in a world where people totally misunderstand what's going on in their lives right now. They put their hope, their dreams, their priorities in things that have no lasting meaning. What they can't fathom is that only God knows the big picture that we do not know. He is in control of the chaos. God knows the big picture that we don't know. He's in control of the chaos. Folks, when we come to follow Jesus as our Savior, we're putting our life in the hands of someone who already knows the future. He sees it right now. See, He's above time. He's not a slave to time like we are. You and I are enslaved to time. How do I know that? Because you and I don't know what's going to happen the next minute. But it's going to affect us, and we're powerless to do anything about it. That's enslavement. God is not enslaved with time. God's control gives hope that transcends our circumstances. When we follow God, we know that He already knows what happens, and the chaos is going to be used for His good purposes. Christ, when we follow Him, overturns our worldly expectations. His rules, His values, they give the chaos meaning. When you and I put our faith in Jesus, even though life makes a left turn and spins out of control, and we can't do anything about it, the circumstances that are happening around us that we can't control, that impact us. When we put our faith in Jesus, we know that He has a reason for them. When we can't figure it out, He already has it figured out, and then we can, in faith, trust that it's going to be okay eventually because He is in control of whatever chaos we have. There's meaning in our death, meaning that we can order our lives to have God's priorities. There's meaning in the chaos because God is in control of even the chaos, but there's also meaning in the mundane. When you're a younger person, you kind of think in terms of big events in your life. Remember that when you were a kid? When I'm an adult, I'm going to do this. I had the idea before I could ride a bike. If I could ever learn how to ride a bike, at 6 years old, I taught myself to ride a bike. My big brothers tried a few times, and I have the scars to prove that didn't work out. But I finally, at 6 years old, made myself ride the bike. And I remember thinking at one point, my motivation was, when I can learn to ride a bike, and I lived in South Carolina, I'm going to drive or actually ride to California. I don't know why, but California was another name for paradise for me. And I think it's because my grandmother lived out there. And I think, I'm going to go ride to Grandma's in California. And I made it up the street to the stop sign and turned around. Anyway, but folks, why do we think in big events? Because we're just trained to. And that can carry into adult life as well. But what we don't understand till we're much older is what? Life is what happens to us while we're waiting on life to happen. Right? Life is in the mundane. Life is in the everyday. And when we overlook that because we're looking for something greater and better, what we tend to realize later on is that we let a lot of life slip by because we were looking past it while it was happening to us. So we should enjoy the mundane. Here's what the writer says: go ahead, eat your food with joy, drink your wine with a happy heart, for God approves of this. Wear fine clothes with a splash of cologne. Live happily with the woman you love through all the meaningless days of life that God has given you under the sun. The wife God gives you is your reward for all your earthly toil. Whatever you do, do well. For when you go to the grave, there will be no work or planning or knowledge or wisdom. Do you know what asceticism is? It is a type of religion. It's not just Christian. Buddhists, monks do this. Hindus do this. We have Catholic monks that do this. We have Catholic nuns that do this. We have legalist Christians that do this. And they basically have a philosophy that says nothing in this world is good, so you shouldn't enjoy it. You shouldn't go for any kind of joy at all in this world. Folks, that's unbiblical. We have to strike a balance in how we enjoy and what we choose to enjoy. But there are everyday joys that we are to enjoy, that God gave us. We are to celebrate the gifts of daily life and blessings to be enjoyed. We are to live proactively and enter into some simple pleasures with fullness and gratitude. I will tell you, when I have this weekend, I look forward to every March. And be, oh, it's because it's your birthday. No, it's not. It's because St. Patrick's Day. You're Irish? No, I'm not. Then why do you look towards St. Patrick's Day? Because Winn-Dixie puts corned beef on sale. And my wife knows how to make corned beef and cabbage. And it's one of my favorite meals, and I get it once a year. And so I got it this weekend, and when I go home, I'm going to eat leftovers, and I couldn't be more happy about that. Little joys. In my older age, I've come to realize this is a good thing. I enjoy March 17th. I really do. I don't care about being Irish. I'm not Irish at all. But if corned beef is going on sale and we can afford it, I'm going to be good for a few meals. And you may think, well, that's kind of a low bar. Well, for me, it's really nice. I really like it. I enjoy corned beef and cabbage, the way my wife makes it. These little enjoyments, there's nothing wrong with that. God is, Dean, it's okay, to enjoy little things like this. Enjoyment is not frivolous. It's a wise response to God's provision. It's not frivolous to enjoy the things of this earth. We are to celebrate the gifts of daily life, but we have to know that enjoyment is not frivolous. It's a wise response to God's provision. But we have to keep that in balance. We can enjoy simple pleasures because God's promise of eternal life is true. Now look, if all I had to look forward to for eternity was corned beef and cabbage, I wouldn't want to be there. I mean, I like it in March. Not April, May, June, and all. March is good. I don't eat it any other time. But it's great then. We don't waste time waiting for big events or best moments. We enjoy God's provisions of every day. We can enjoy life while keeping our hearts and minds full on to eternity. A man went to his friend, and he kept his friend kind of agitated because he kept drinking to excess. And he kept telling his friend, please, 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 stop drinking so much. You're drinking to excess. It's going to be bad for you. One day he decided to show his friend an object lesson. So he brought with him to visit his friend 2 glasses and then a worm. And he went to the sink at his friend's kitchen and filled up the glass with water. And he said, come here. And he had the man sit at the table with him. And he dropped the worm in the glass of water. And the worm started wiggling. And he said, see the worm? Yeah, the worm's fine. He said, can I borrow some of your whiskey? The man said, sure. So he filled the other glass with whiskey. And then he took the worm out, still alive, and dropped it in the whiskey glass with the whiskey. And after about a minute, the worm was dead. And the man with tears in his eyes looked at his friend and he said, do you get the point of what I just showed you? And the man with a solemn look in his eye looked at his friend and said, I get the point absolutely. If you drink a lot of booze, you don't have to worry about getting worms. None of you saw that one coming? Folks, the point is this. We are to enjoy things, but not to the point that they become distractions, not to the point that they become problems. But that doesn't mean we go to the other extreme and not enjoy at all. God lives and works in the mundane. He's just as present there as he is in these touchstone moments of life, these monuments of life that come to us from time to time. The mundane is not unimportant. I love the story in John 2 of Jesus' first miracle. Do you know what it was? It took place at a wedding. Somewhat of a mundane thing when you live in a village or a town. Weddings happen all the time. It's different if it's your family, but on a daily weekend or a given weekend, there's always a wedding somewhere. It happens over and over and over again. And Jesus visits a wedding. His mom was at the wedding, and so he visited the wedding there in Cana, this small town. And his mom, of course, you know the story, said, hey, they run out of wine. It's going to be an embarrassment to the host. Could you do something about it? And Jesus said, what do you got in mind? I don't know. She goes, just you can hear Mary, the mother, just do something. And then she tells the people, the stewards there, do whatever this guy tells you to do. And so you know the story. Jesus has water brought, and he turns it into wine, really good wine apparently. Why was that his first miracle? It happened at a wedding. He turned water into wine. Folks, you would think that if God wanted to announce his presence with authority, he wouldn't do it at some small town, and within that small town, a small wedding, and within that wedding, making water into wine. What Jesus, I think, one of the things he was doing was showing us that he shows up in the mundane all the time. The mundane parts of your life, you don't think God's there? Yes, he is. And you may not even recognize the miracles that are going on right around you in these mundane times. I know I don't. I know that for the first 500 to 1,000 years in heaven, I'm going to be sitting around with my mind blown thinking, I had no idea that was taking place while this was going on. Really, God? Was that? How could I be so blind? You were doing that? Wow. Folks, the mundane is where God dwells most of the time, because that's what happens to us. Jesus ministered at that wedding. Here's what we're told. The first of his miraculous signs Jesus performed at Cana in Galilee, he thus revealed his, what's that word? Glory. Where? At a small wedding in a small town called Cana. And what happened to those who followed him? They put their faith in him. It changed their world forever. God works in the mundane. Your day-to-day lives are just as important as the big events in your life. God is in the mundane. We'll take this with you. Life is unpredictable, but we can find joy in the present and trust God's eternal plan for us. And it happens and it gets unfolded in days that we think are unimportant. Acknowledging the inevitability of death leads to a deeper appreciation for life. When you have death at the forefront of your mind, it doesn't sadden the believer. It reminds us that this life is not all there is, and so we don't put all our eggs in this basket and thus aren't wholly disappointed when things don't work out and the chaos works against us. Engaging intentionally with loved ones and others expresses gratitude for daily blessings. There are reasons none of us are islands and all of us are engaged with other people. Doesn't mean you have to be married. It doesn't mean you have to have blood relatives around you. But if there are other people around you, they're the ones God has brought into your life to enrich you and for you to enrich theirs. And he's just as much present in those situations as in any other situation for anybody else. And while our days are numbered, each day offers opportunities for joy and ministry. They have a purpose. They have meaning. Even our deaths, even in the chaos, even in the mundane. I remember hearing of a young man who went to his minister. He was greatly distressed, and he said, "Can you tell me what I must do to find peace?" And the minister looked at him sadly and said, "You're too late." And the young man said, "What do you mean I'm too late? What do you mean I'm too late? You mean I'm too late to be saved?" And the minister said, "No, you're just too late to do something. Jesus did everything that was needed to be done 2,000 years ago. If you're here this morning and you're waiting for God to do something, or you're trying to figure out something to do, can I tell you that to find meaning in every moment of this life is no more complicated than letting Jesus be Lord of every moment in your life. And right now, he's asking you to admit that you need him because you have sinned and only he can wipe it away. To believe that he's the only one who can bring you to God the Father, and to commit your way to follow him. You may not understand fully and completely everything God's asking, but you know one thing, that you want it. And if that is true, would you pray right now silently to God in your own words, and he will hear you. If you'd like to talk to me about it, it would be my pleasure. You don't have to. But if there's a question you'd like to ask, I would be more than happy to have a conversation with you. This card's a great way to do it. On it, there's a checkbox that says, I'd like to know more about becoming a follower of Jesus. Check that box. Give me a way to get in touch with you. And this week, we'll get together and talk about the most important decision you could make. As we leave this morning, I hope that you are re-examining every moment of your life. Ecclesiastes is telling us that the mundane parts of life, the chaotic parts of life, the uncomfortable parts of life are just as important to God as any other moment. And he has a purpose for you in them. And when you find that purpose, you live the plan that's best for you and will bless you. Father, thank you for this warning today, this understanding today of what is acceptable to you. Would you give us the ability to follow every moment, the sad moments, the happy moments, the chaotic moments, the dull moments, the everyday regular moments. Father, you are still there. Let us follow you in every second of each moment. Thank you in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.